I was about 4 or 5 when I started attending Army-Navy American football games. It's a huge tradition in America and arguably the biggest rivalry known to man. I think my mom, a single mother at the time, really wanted me to expose myself to activities that included both men and women. I guess she thought going to the mall wasn't sufficient for character development or something. So we'd go to these games, and before the football games start, you see midshipmen and cadets, the students of these respective schools, walk on and off the football field. It's sort of a display of discipline and order and really regimentness. And I was so attracted to that. I think a small fraction of my own OCD really wanted to be a part of that, and even to lead that one day. Fast forward to my junior year of secondary school, and I send in an application. I talk about the purpose and importance of diversity and inclusion, and luckily, I earn an appointment to the United States Military Academy. It was a wild journey, those 4 years of university, and something I'm so thankful for, something that was integral to my own development. But I would say the most shattering aspect of that came in my final year at the academy. It was the summer before my senior year, and I was applying for a position that was the highest ranking position at my school. I had to go through something almost like a 6-week interview where I display my capacity and ability to do a lot of different things. Public speaking, administrative roles, working with others, being an inspirational leader. These are some of the many. And so it came to the time in early August that the leaders of the school would let me know what the decision was, what had happened, and what position I would fill during the academic year. I believe it was the 1st of August, and I was in a really hot office, still doing the summer training that I was responsible for, and all of a sudden I hear a loud, thunderous noise in the house that we were working in. It was the Commandant of Cadets, who is a 1-star general. He is the second highest ranking officer at our school, and he was coming to have a discussion with all of us about the positions that we would soon fill. He asked me to come into a conference room, and we sat across from one another at a table. And he looked at me. He's such a nice guy, but I think he could tell I was a little nervous. And he said to me, "Simone, I want to let you know that I've selected you to be the first captain of the Corps of Cadets." I think he paused, kind of expecting me maybe to smile or to laugh. And I was speechless. I had nothing to say. And he said, "Simone, I want you to know that a lot of the discussions that will ensue after this discussion will be surrounding your race and gender. But I have not selected you for those components. I have selected you for your merit alone." I thought it was a nice compliment. I think saying the unimportance of my race and gender actually was sort of flattering. It gave me another sense of confidence that maybe I was able to fill these shoes. Maybe I was able to perform well based off of things that I couldn't control, such as my race and gender. But I didn't necessarily understand the relevance of what he was saying. Why was he so serious in telling me this? Why was this so important? I would soon find out. In the 200 years of my academy's history, there had never been a Black woman to fill this role. So obviously, when this selection was made, it was the topic of discussion. Interviews, Instagram posts, Twitter shout-outs, articles, and so much more highlighted the first African-American female first captain. I mean, some of them didn't even include my name, but like a mugshot of me that everyone could see. It was flattering, but there was something about it that I felt was not elicited. And I think it was almost the randomness in which I saw my appointment. That for a different Black woman in America, from a different socioeconomic class, with a different set of religious beliefs, would that same person still be as accessible to this opportunity as I was? Or was this just a matter of luck? I think this is what I mean by the cost of celebrating the first, and something I wasn't able to really grasp during that past year that now separated from the experience I can share now in a note to myself. We're very familiar with the phrases such as breaking glass ceilings, breaking down barriers, overcoming obstacles. The way that they're used are meant to describe the feats that people achieve within their respective spaces and the honorable work that they are doing to pave a path for those behind them. It sounds great. It's amazing. And I think it's something that we should really recognize within our society. But I do believe it's a one-sided narrative. There's a component of these feats that we do not address in the main media. There are parts of the discussion that are omitted. And in this way, I'd like to highlight the costs, both individual and institutional, to being the first and to breaking these glass ceilings. I'd first like to create a definition of what the first means. For this speech, I will address the first as people who are in environments and organizations, on teams that represent a minority group or a group identified or characterized by race, gender, sexual orientation, things of the like. And their firstness is qualified in the way that they attain or win an award or gain a position in a way that no one has done before. For me, this revolved around my race and gender. I was the first African American female first captain, and in this way, my Blackness, my womanhood, and my involvement in the military made me uniquely positioned to end inequality in a traditional system of ranking. It was that easy. By me just being here and doing interviews and sharing the importance of diversity, I could break down these traditional systems that made it impossible for others to reach the same goals. I remember it was the graduation day of my senior year, and I was about to be commissioned as an officer in the US Army. I was standing in extreme heat on a turf football field, sweating to death, and I think I got a couple shades darker, thinking to myself, had I done the work I came to do? Did I need a couple more days just to make sure that all the other Black women at my school had this same opportunity in their futures? Did I become distracted in the process by the glimmer and the lights of the interviews and attention? And was I perhaps distracted this entire year? This logical fallacy and this almost destructive thinking put a burden and a pressure on myself that I was not able to carry. I felt disappointed in the work that I had failed to do and for the permanency of the change that was not true. I felt my positioning was very temporary and therefore the change was temporary. And in this way, I'd like to address how we can make it more permanent by addressing the costs on the individual components and the institutional levels. We'll start with the individual. Consider a bare human body breaking through a glass ceiling. A silly decision. But the rupturing creates the shattering of glass that can be quite painful. I mean, this is why we don't break through glass windows, ceilings to begin with. The shards of glass wedge themselves into your skin, and you start to feel the pain. That even though you made it to that new level of success, there is a consequence of that. This manifested itself in racist comments, sexist aggression, you name it. And when I was first appointed, I had a really close friend of mine who came to me and said, "You know, Simone, the only reason you were selected was because of your race and gender. I mean, obviously they had to put you on this spreadsheet of names because they need to show that they're all about the whole diversity thing." And I think at the time that was a small fraction of the praise that I was getting. It wasn't loud enough to make an impact. But the insecure 18-year-old version of me held on to those comments. And as they started to flow in more frequently, I started to question whether what the commandant said was really relevant. Was it about my merit, or at the end of the day, was it about race? Because if you think about it, both the positive and the negative things that were said about me focused on these two components alone. In this way, the shards wedge themselves and are almost permanent, making you sometimes unrecognizable to yourself and to people around you. There were days that I really struggled to remain positive. I felt down and almost unconfident in a way that wasn't cool, it wasn't attractive, and for no reason, right? That in theory, I would be able to ignore the things that were said about me, but for some reason I wasn't. There's another component on the individual level that creates an extreme cost, and it's that of isolation. There was a club I was a part of called the Cultural Affairs Seminar at my school. It was similar to a Black student union, a community that focused on cultural awareness, but also thriving in a space where African American students were the extreme minority. And we had awesome dinners, we had movie screenings, we even had tutoring sessions to make sure that we maintained retention of the Black students at West Point, that they didn't leave the academy and pursue a different path simply because they didn't have the help they needed. I spent a majority of my time with that club, but when I was selected as the first captain, I no longer had the time to be a part of it. And so my new status as this high leader in my school made me separated from this club that I had spent and identified with so greatly. It made me unable to do activism in a way that I had first conceptualized it, and forced me to take on a new type of leadership, a new type of activism, but amongst people that didn't necessarily look like me. And while race and gender are not the utmost important things, I do think being in rooms and spaces where you can identify with someone does create a sense of comfort. And this was a comfort that I did not have. Secondly, I'd like to talk about the institutional consequences. Thinking about the rupturing of a glass ceiling and where the shards that don't find their places in your body, where they go. I argue that they fall on to those below you, that those glass shards from that rupturing of a ceiling fall below. In the way that I think this happens, it's almost a box-checking activity in some cases. There were groups that said, now that we've had a Black first captain, a Black female first captain, obviously, it is an equal system. Now that there has been an African-American president, America doesn't have to worry about racism. Or since a poor young woman was able to reach and graduate from college, higher education is accessible to all. And you see how this reasoning is not true. That by simply me occupying this role doesn't mean that the work is done. But almost this first narrative creates a sort of complacency amongst a community. There were a lot of people who knew that this wasn't true. I would say the majority of my leaders and the people I worked with at West Point knew this wasn't true. But there are communities that do, and they accept that truth. It's dangerous if we go down that path to accept that the firsts and those single and temporary breakings of ceilings is all that needs to be done for us to be worried about it and then on to the next. But I have a proposition. What if these glass ceilings are movable? What if they are inanimate objects, but things that can be quite literally lifted up and placed to the side? In this way, I'd like to ask and propose that as a community, we collectively share this burden of breaking glass ceilings by quite literally removing them from systems of inequality. The way that I saw this on a continual basis was a mentor that I had, an officer at the military academy who was a white man. He was a leader of my company, and so he was the officer that was responsible for pretty much everything I did. And since my sophomore year, he was a very, very impactful person in my life. We talked about leadership, about our futures, about what it meant to be an honorable person, how servitude actually made a greater impact than power. He invested in me in a way that was not possible. And so when these interviews came and asked, how does it feel for you to break through these ceilings? I almost wondered if it wasn't just me. I mean, I wasn't the only one that had won this success. There were people alongside and not only with me, but fighting for me to make it possible for me to be here. So in the same way, whether you're Black or white or Asian or African, male or female, might we all have the power to create firsts and to quite literally use our small lot of privilege in order to create a more equal space. So today I'd like to ask that as a community, we consider how we each can destabilize and destroy these systems of inequality so that the first alone do not have to pay the cost of breaking glass ceilings. Thank you.